Did we have a packet for today?
You're live.
All right. Call this meeting special workshop to order at 6 p.m. on November the 6th here in the town of Weddington. Do I need to, we can jump kind of right into it, or?
I need a motion to adopt I move to adopt the agenda as presented.
Do we have an agenda?
Yeah.
Yeah. D917.
It's basically a
Right,
workshop.
that's what I didn't see one of those. So awesome.
We did have some info from the meeting on the 27th that you had in that packet that we wanted to discuss, right? Those, you had some
We did have
edits.
some other stuff.
I have information from the past two planning board meetings, the packet specifically available for reference.
Okay.
For our discussion.
So we're going to discuss besides just 917E.
And basically, all right, so we got a motion for adoption of agenda. We get a second?
I'll second.
Second, all in favor? Aye. Unanimous. All right, determination of a quorum.
Barely.
I'd say we do now as we're on a short board.
Okay.
So I'd say we got a determination. Move into the workshop regarding UDO Section D 917E, additional specific requirements for conventional residential development. Greg, if you want to just give us a brief rundown real quick.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. So this discussion of D917E, which in layman's terms is the requirements for new conventional subdivision applications. A being applying to everyone, B being applying to conservation subdivisions, C being commercial, D being et cetera, et cetera. We discussed this in the past couple of meetings. Bill's provided some good feedback on text amendments he would like to put into this requirement. In our last scheduled meeting, this was on the agenda. It was actually a special called meeting, and this was on the agenda, and it was determined that this should be more fleshed out into a workshop, which is our purpose here tonight. So no business will be conducted tonight. No votes will be taken tonight. This is simply a workshop to discuss this particular topic. This whole UDO section 917 is basically talking about the requirements for new applications or new subdivisions that come to town. So this is an appendix 2B. This isn't a checklist, but these are things that people should do when they're aiming to develop new residential communities within Weddington. For example, our previous standard was 10% for developments. Now it's 20%. And so this new section is to kind of balance out, okay, now that we got to do 20%, what are the other things we're asking for and what are the concessions we can make? The subcommittee has met on this before, and we adopted this new section 917E. It's roughly borrowed from conservation side. And again, the main objective of this section is to not infringe on property rights of longtime property owners, small lots, other things. These are things that should just apply to new applications.
And this is 6 lots or more, correct?
That's correct. And so, well, it's actually greater than 6
6
lots.
lots,
Yeah.
So it'd
7.
be 7 lots.
7 lots.
Which, yeah, that comes up often. That's good clarification. And so, we hold this strict standard to conservation type subdivisions. It kind of made it easy. And conventional subdivisions, for example, because a lot of the trees are going to be up on kind of these areas unbuildable and unbuildable. Say, bless you.
Thank you.
In advance, by segments of this area. Just the last thing I note, this is a great example of a code section in the UDO that could use visual aid, that could show an example of this is what we want shown. This area is buildable. This area is unbuildable. This area is your yield. We've had confusion over that in applications. We've had manipulation of that in applications. think that's one of the things we'd like to shore up is, what are we looking for as an exhibit that's included in your packet that they can show that complies with this section. All that said, this is a workshop, this is a discussion. Please be loose about conversating back and forth. You don't have to, make a motion or anything like that. This is a workshop. We're not making any decisions today.
Awesome. Thank you, Greg. One thing before I start, can I borrow one of those pens?
Yes.
I came ill prepared. Thank you. You need a pen, Scott?
Thanks, sir.
Thank you. You need some paper?
Speaking of a visual, which I think is great, I'm a super visual guy. I know when the subcommittee got together and we talked about this, we were drawing pictures, this and that. I got with Greg because I didn't feel the way it was written up, it was real clear. So Greg, I kind of drew this and that, and I said, am I looking at this right? We were kind of got a head nod. So I created a visual to see if
The visual matches the intent of what the words are saying.
or if so everyone understands the intent is right, if this is the intent, and I think that would help us. So what I've done, and I apologize for the people out there, I'll pass it out once we're done. But this is an example, and correct me if I'm wrong. This is a 20-acre parcel, okay? It's got steep cliffs, that's what that is, greater than 25%, steep slopes.
Mhm.
This is a floodplain. Here's a creek that comes into a pond. So basically what we're saying is this is not buildable land. So what we'd say is, all right, of our 20-acre parcel, we've got 4 acres, I'm making up these numbers here, that are not buildable or what we were calling in the ordinance, primary conservation subdivision or primary conservation land. Basically unbuildable land. So if we looked at this and then we're saying, okay, I got my 20-acre parcel, here's my primary, basically unbuildable land. So I've got 16 acres of buildable land. If it's a conditional subdivision, actually if it's either subdivision, my yield plan would come out of these 16 acres. So keeping it simple, 16 acres, 16 homes. All right, it's gonna be less than that by the time you get roads and stuff. So if it's my conservation subdivision, again, getting simple, I'm gonna basically say, and this is an oversimplification, here's 8 acres, here's 8 acres, and I can put 16 homes over here. 20,000 foot average square lot, 18, but it has to average up 20. And then this becomes conservation. And conversely, if this was a R40 subdivision,
They get to use all that.
they
Put 16 houses on everything.
put 16 houses on all of this. So that was the concept, right? Correct me if I'm wrong. That's the concept we were coming with. But I just didn't feel, you guys want to look at that and pass around, I'm happy to leave it with you. I just didn't feel because I was trying to read the ordinance, I just didn't feel it was coming through clearly. So that's what I talked to Greg about. And I tried to take a shot at some changes on the 917, but when I did it, only where it referred to open space or conservation land.
So,
And then,
yeah.
And so the difference too was that an open space, whereas RCD, the primary conservation, they still had to give open space outside of that, which is where you dedicate. This one does not. That open space, that primary conservation can count as their percentage and they can build in the good land. They didn't have to come back in that good land and give an additional 20% because they gave whatever primary was out of it in
well,
conventional.
to me, that was another question when the council upped that 10% to 20%. I'm thinking, okay,
That's got to affect the yield.
does that really
If-
have a real impact on the conservation lands?
If there's not enough.
Especially if you've got primary that you're saying, hey, we're taking this off the table to begin with.
Correct. Whereas in conventional, that could have been part of their property. That could have been in someone's backyard. The
Before.
property line, yes, correct.
Before.
So we were trying to align the goals of RCD to say, let's just pull that land out. But in conventional, they would be allowed to use that towards their common open space calc. Since they're pulling it out, we're not taking their property rights away. We're just going to go ahead and pull it out, build on good land, make lots on good land. And then if it doesn't meet that 20%, they have to find the additional somewhere else.
So,
but they
right.
automatically are going to put that into.
So if you start from a blank slate of all good land, all buildable land, no steep slopes
or
no
anything.
nothing, right? Then you have to pull the 20% out
Right.
and then do the yield.
Correct.
If you have land that you can't build on, and if it's 20% or more, that should count as the open space.
In conventional.
In conventional.
I
right.
feel like that should, because the goal was not to make those lots where it could be lots traditionally, to just make lots to get an extra lot back there. And then,
Yeah, because on the example there, the 20 acres and 4 of it is primary conservation, that's 20%.
yeah, you've met the,
So that's
Right.
that covers their open space.
then they got the 16 acres of buildable good land to put quality lots on.
Right.
And whatever road network, whatever they needed to through, instead of it giving up that additional other half. Whereas RCD would have half of that to put their lots at 20,000. The conventional still has to stick to the big lots, but they just get the bigger land.
Right.
Yeah, conventional, I think is pretty straightforward. It's the RCD now, and then when you have to look at what is considered primary conservation and secondary conservation, and the tiering system that you're going to use to determine that.
Because you used to be able to, if you could carve out, depending on where you were in the UDO, 9,000 square foot or 10,000 square foot spot for it
To build on.
Build on. You could have a floodplain.
Whole
or a
9 yards in
creek
there,
or
yep.
Steep slopes on your property, and now we're saying, no,
right.
you can't. So that's generally the concept, I think.
Yes, and you'll probably see more unbuildable land now in the conventional subdivisions because of that. Because they were bringing those lots into potential wetland,
Correct.
just a little bit of it, right? So now you can't do it anymore. So you're going to get more of that land that's unbuildable in the conventional zone, which could account for the 20%.
Yeah, so again, in conventional, I felt like we were reading something that was confusing everybody. And when you try in the conventional, and when we tried to articulate it at one meeting, we had a hard time articulating. I'm reading the common open space. It's 20%, no more than 50%.
Is that on the 917A?
It's to go to B. Yeah, 917E
Oh,
additional
okay.
for conventional, and go to B and read open space.
You said D?
Yeah, I think it might be this: not more than 50% of that minimum required area of open space shall be comprised of wetlands, submerged land, steep slopes. So in that case, in Bill's thing, we only get to use half of that.
Yeah, and
Because
what was the reasoning for that?
I don't know. I really think that we should be able, I really think the goal was meant to align with pulling it out and putting it into conservation and not be not conservation, putting it in a common open space. So
Right.
it wasn't going to be part of a lot.
Right.
Then all lots that would be delivered to a new resident were going to be quality lots. So maybe that's where our hiccup was not more than that 50%. Cause then I feel close that we might be stepping on
Yeah, you're cutting into
homeowners. Yeah. I mean, you just,
good land.
because you're going to have to give 10% of good land now, and you gave up more.
Let's give an example of a site that has 20% of the land is floodplain. Under this rule, you're saying, okay, you got to set aside 10% of that is floodplain, but that other 10% of floodplain has to be on somebody's private lot, because you're restricted on how much common open space can be limited by these factors.
Correct.
Yeah, but I mean, we're not allowing any
Say that
floodplain
again.
on.
So
private
read
lots,
B.
Right,
And the second sentence, not more than 50% of the minimum required area of open space shall be comprised of wetlands, submerged lands, steep slope floodplains. So to his point, the
Is that D917B?
E,
Oh, E,
Echo.
yep, which is why I think we were,
where it says
Have-
primary conservation land?
no, it's D917E is additional specific requirements for conventional residential subdivisions or major subdivisions.
A is everybody, B's conservation, et cetera,
E
et
is
cetera.
additional.
E is conventional,
Yeah.
which is our new section.
And we were saying, we're not going to punish any citizen here. Joe Weddington gets to do what he wants on
Yeah,
A.
yeah.
But if anyone comes in and takes Joe Weddington's land and goes 7 lots or
To
greater,
develop it.
yeah,
Yeah.
we wanted this to align with some of the goals that RCD
Yeah.
had with pulling out the bad land so that it just wasn't being able to create lots on it.
Yeah, I think there was an important statement a couple of weeks ago. We got several of our councilmen-elect in the audience. We kind of described that as for-profit land or land, for profit that were going to be developed versus somebody's private homestead.
That owns the land he wants you
of the gross
gross
acreage.
acreage. And gross acreage,
It's the total tract.
okay.
So the total track's 20
total
acres.
tract, yeah, of the tract will be required to be retained as common open space, not more than 50%
The wetlands.
of the minimum required area of open space shall be comprised of wetlands.
Now thinking conventional, we want to go ahead and put that as common open space.
In the conventional section,
Oh, this is,
or
right, yeah.
in the conservation section, excuse me, we changed this from basically 50% to 0%. We said if it's challenging lands, it's got to go into public lands. And then with this, we want same thing, challenging lands to be kind of common open space, HOA maintained lands, and not have that on private property. That idea is 50%, which was the original. The other one is saying, like, we shouldn't reward you for building a company you weren't going to build on anyway. You should have some of that common open space be a neighborhood green, or common open space, or a buffer around the property, areas that you could have built on, but by not building on, let's say there was a row of evergreens on the side of property that you would normally just wipe out to make somebody's private backyard. You're saying, let's set aside some of that as common open space. Let's make that as a buffer between the neighborhoods, et cetera, et cetera. So
And-
there's a
so
rationale behind.
That will be the case in
So-
a lot that has no deep slopes, it's got all buildable
Correct.
land.
If it's 20 acres
They'll
of
have
pure,
to come up with 20% of something to put aside.
correct. But they would have to at that
Yes,
point.
they
And
have to.
even if it's the farmland, they would have to plant to get to some type of common open
Right.
space.
Right, so I mean, it all depends on the land, really, and what's out there.
And since the conservation section was written, which we know was based on Randall Art's, consultation and advice to the town several years ago, we've made a significant advance in our tree ordinance, and we have literally doubled the amount of open space that's required for these developments. So there are some, shifts in language that impact the original language that may say, okay, these things settle out. But per the discussion we've had already, there's some maybe confusion about how much we want to apply this to new development. If they already have to set aside 20% of open space, what are we actually asking them for? What are we asking them to demonstrate to us that they're planning for? So I think is what we want to get to. What deliverable do we want from these for-profit developers?
So in Bill's illustration, he would only be able to use half of what's not buildable as his common open space. So he had 4 acres he can only use 2 of that, which means 2 acres within the buildable area has to go into common open space. Correct?
Correct.
The way it's
Per is
now.
written now.
Per the way it's written.
And I don't think that is what the real intent of doing a normal big lot subdivision was meant to be.
See, what I was trying to do, I finally found was saying is at a minimum 20%, and I said the adjusted tract acreage. So I'm saying that
You got to give another 20% on the 8 acres on 8 acres. I would not ever be in part of that for a regular conventional
you're
subdivision
20%.
of the
I was
16.
thinking 20, not 20% on the 20 acres,
Right.
because this. we don't
So
want-
you're going to pull that out of a homeowner's land. Then you're going to tell them they got to do 20% additional on the 16 for a
Okay.
conventional subdivision.
Yeah, but aren't we saying that this could count towards that?
Right now, it
20%?
counts 50%.
Yeah, but you're saying with the adjusted track yield, that would not, because the
Yeah.
adjusted track definition says pull all that
Pull the
out,
Primary out, yeah.
give us the area you have left and in RCD, and now you've got to start meeting our 20%.
So that definition of adjusted tract yield is really just for conservation.
That was my
Subdivision.
understanding.
Yeah,
But we wanted to align the conventional to pull out the bad land instead of it just being, but not necessarily penalize them on the common open space
yeah,
part.
because like I was saying, the yield plan, whether conventional or RCD would be the same.
Correct.
Yeah,
Correct. Because the RCDs in theory is doing a yield plan per our conventional
right,
layout.
right.
So yes, whereas before you've seen where their yield plan can go into the Badlands and they
Right,
just show how
right.
many lots they're getting. So I would be in favor of removing that second sentence. And then a good trade-off would be asking them to just take the Badlands. And to Steve's point, I don't think we're always going to get our whole complete 20% in wasted land. But when we do have bad land, just go ahead and give him credit, pull it aside, don't put it in someone's lot. And then let him start putting on those 16 acres. He can put his 16 homes.
So you're saying take out basically that second sentence?
Yeah, for the E, 917E, take out the second sentence where we're not going to make him
Yeah.
give,
So it-
pull out all that land and then go get more good land.
Okay, well,
I think our goal is to just make sure they're using good land.
this,
From the previous.
That's from the
yeah.
previous meeting, yeah. That's in the meeting.
but I know there was a problem because I printed something on the back of the page and Karen, when she ran copy, she didn't realize that, but then you sent out here, look at that one. See, I think that's what you're saying on B, where I lined out the whole second sentence. And I'm not sure if that's
This is
what.
the D917E, right? B1.
Yeah, well, you've just, instead of gross acreage, you're wanting to use the adjusted track acreage yield.
Yeah, I don't think you can use that for conventional.
So at a minimum, 20% of the adjusted track acreage yield of the track will be required to be retained as common open space. And adjusted track yield definition was pull out all the bad land,
All the primary conservation land.
then that's what you had for your yield. So you're going to say, pull out his 4 acres, now give another 16 acres, 20% in that needs to be common open space. So you're going to give 4 acres plus additional 20% of good land in the common open space.
Oh, okay, well, what
Yeah.
I was thinking is, you got your 20-acre tract, and maybe it's just, I'll say coincidence that 4 of that is bad land. And so 20%, if we take 20% of the gross parcel, that's 4 acres. I was saying 20%
Of the adjusted.
of the adjusted, which would be 3.2 acres of open space.
And I would be good if you wanted to word that, but still giving credit for the land you're pulling out. Because we don't know how much of the land, when you do the gross, you'll know how much we're pulling out.
Yeah.
And it needs to be in common open space, not in
So-
someone's lot.
So a question for you, Bill. Are you saying that instead of having the 4 acres be the required, it would only be the 3 point something?
In
It's
this,
the,
in this example,
right, but it's the 20, you don't, you add, you take it out, but you add it back in. So you're figuring out the common open space on the buildable area. But if the badland is greater than that, then that's what it is.
And your percentage instead of 20 might be 30.
No.
Yeah, because his 20, if he's saying that adjusted track is 3.2 acres, but you're giving 4, you gave more than 20%
You gave
of
more, yeah.
3.2 acres. You gave 35% of your adjusted track. If you're counting all the badland.
Right.
Yes.
Right. But if it ended up being something shy of it,
If it was shy, you just have to add
Add it
more.
somewhere else, correct. But the adjusted yield would be favorable to the developer if you get to count the primary as common open space and he's only going to do his calcs off of pulling it out of the adjusted versus the gross. Because if gross was 4 acres, great. Then his adjusted is 3.2, but he's still given 4 acres of common open space. We're well over 20% in our calcs for development data. So it would be giving the developer a hand up to use the adjusted track yield to quantify his 20% he needs to give. Because if he was given 3.2 acres on this total track due to the adjusted track, but he gave 4, he's well over. He would come in saying, hey, I'm giving 32% open space on this
yeah,
project.
I was looking,
what would that do for him?
No, just look like he's giving more than the ordinance says. You know, if you were minimum is 20% and I come in and say, look, I'm giving 50%. I'm giving 40% on a conventional.
Sure.
It would look good for a developer.
But it doesn't, it doesn't affect the build, correct?
Correct. Doesn't affect the build. So nor does the gross. You're still getting some type of yield coming out. 20%, whether it comes out of the adjusted yield, which is in his case, 16 acres, or it comes out of the gross. It's just a calculation number. What's 20% being taken from?
all right, so if you had, let's say, 10% primary or unbuildable, that'd be 2 acres. Then you got 18 acres. My thinking was your 20% applies to that 18 acres, which is 3.6.
Additional to the primary?
No.
Yes.
See, I would not. I would not be in favor.
I think you're misspeaking. It's not additional. You're talking about just having that be what he has to come out.
Yes.
Yeah, I think what you guys are saying, my latest example, 3.8 acres, but we've already taken, well, in that example,
You gave 4 acres out of
4.
20.
we took 2 acres off the table. I'm using a
Yeah,
10% example.
Yeah, so if instead of the colored area that Bill's grandchild drew,
The
It's-
unbuildable land,
it's
let's say,
2 acres instead of 4. So that gives you 18.
right?
So now he's got to come out with 3.6. So it's the 2 acres of unbuildable land plus 1.6.
Okay.
Yeah.
Is that-
I'm fine with that.
Yeah.
That's what I'm trying to get clarity around.
If there's 20% of unbuildable land, he's good, right? In conservation. If it's less than 20% of unbuildable, he's got to come up with, he's got to make it up to 20%
Right. But
with buildable land.
But we're not going to penalize him
Not
in
to
a
penalize him for that
conventional.
bad land, in a conventional.
Yeah, for having the bad land. RCD, we don't want them to use that land to get their credits to get yield plan, because then that yield plan comes in and they get 8 more
Yeah,
lots
yeah.
because they put lots in it.
And we're putting 8 houses.
And there's 20,000.
On 8 acres.
Yeah, everybody in Weddington would love for you to say we're going to have a neighborhood that's got 1 acre lots.
Yeah.
That's not, I can't imagine we're going to have, but when there's 20,000 and they got an additional 6 or 7 lots because of how you can math it, I think that becomes a little hairy. But this is conventional, big lots.
Yeah, that's what we want, so.
Yeah. So if the bad land becomes their common open space, that's great. I guess it would just be coming back. Do you want to use adjusted track or gross track? And in that situation, I think I would just make it as simple as possible. If you've got gross land, 100 acres, 10 acres, 5 acres, whatever it is, you got to set aside 20%.
Yeah.
If you've got 20% of bad land, well, great.
You're good, yeah.
If you don't, you got to still come up with whatever it is.
But now he's still going to have to determine if it's conservation land, right? And-
Well, it's not conservation,
I mean,
it'd just be primary,
Right.
but it'd be going
Primary
into,
unbuildable land.
yeah, steep slopes, rock outcrop, stuff floodplain, creeks,
But this is for we're talking
conventional only.
an R40 subdivision.
Yep, an R40.
But if we're trying to align things with pulling out the primary in RCD so that a developer can read it the same, shouldn't we then be pulling it out in this too and doing it off of the adjusted as opposed to the full lot?
Or do you mean give in a conservation subdivision, give them credit for this towards the 50?
No, he's saying do the adjusted and conventional and give them the credit of lesser land to pull 20% off of in pulling the bad land out.
Right. I mean, it's apples to apples.
I agree with you.
It's a matter of whether we want it to look like it aligns with RCD as you have to pull out the unbuildable area first, and then we figure everything off of that.
I think that
Yeah.
would make it simpler or
Well-
clearer, because it's kind of a similar type process. It just applies to.
I actually think it would be simpler just looking at 100 acres and saying, okay,
20%.
20%. But if we
Doesn't align.
But if we want it to align with RCD, then I think we need to figure out how to pull out that, but make it not impact the.
They still get to use it back
Right.
towards their calculations.
So I think, and again, I think I understand what you're saying is that you don't, you take the unbuildable land out as far as calculating the percentage that you have to set aside, but that can be a part of that percentage once you figure that out.
Yep. It can't be built on. It's going to not be part of a lot, be kind of just pushed out. But in conventional, they retroactively get to bring it back to their calculation. Whereas RCD, that's where they would split. It doesn't. And again, to Greg's point, I think this is going to be a couple pages of pictures
Yeah.
and kind of a step by step
You're going to use it for calculation of your yield.
in RCD.
In RCD.
Correct.
Yeah, there's no yield plan in conventional.
Well, I know, but I mean, your yield plan is basically
40,000 square foot lots all over the whole property. Now it's not, but it used to be. Show me 40,000 square foot
Right.
lots all over the
But now
property.
what we're saying is 40,000 square foot lots, but you can't
Right.
count that
Right.
buildable land when you're calculating that yield.
In a conventional
In a
subdivision,
conventional.
but we're going to give them credit for that towards the 20%
Of common open space.
common open space.
Yes.
Not to confuse the matter further, but conservation development, 50% of that land is conserved. It's placed in a deed restricted, you can't build on it, kind of set aside. And this 20% we're talking about for conventional development, that doesn't necessarily have to be a conservation land. That doesn't have to be something that's restricted on development. That could be a ball field, you can mow all that down.
It's common open space.
Field as long as you have your tree somewhere else. So just point of clarification for
Yep.
Right. But I
our
think,
future listeners, that open space does not equal conservation land.
Right.
Good call.
I
Good
think the
call.
goal though is we want to build acre lots,
On quality acre
on
land.
quality land. That's what we want to build. So I don't want to penalize a builder who wants to build acre lots.
I agree. Agree.
I want to push them to build acre
Yeah.
lots.
You don't
Because
wanna-
RCD is exploited for what reason it is
That's right,
exploited.
exactly. You
Uh,
give us something, we give you something.
Yes. So whether we do adjusted track to stay in alignment with the RCD, valid argument. I'm good to support that. Or if we did gross, just as long as we're all on the same page that primary pulled out is getting to go back towards that 20% common open space, and they can put picnic tables and do
Yeah.
whatever they want back there. And again, this is just strictly common open space.
And yeah, and like I said, I think just doing it off of the gross acreage is a whole lot cleaner. But, if we're trying to align things so that they look the same within our ordinance, then maybe we pull it out and then add it back in, which, is kind of clunky, but
I don't know, I don't know if I want them to look the same. I mean,
What
That's
do you think,
different.
Greg?
that's different.
I was
than-
going to ask the same and get Greg's.
Visuals, I think, will go a long way towards it, but.
I think the goal of our meeting today is to have alignment of what we're expecting and to not unexpectedly create some kind of loophole. We're like, oh man, they just tweaked this text amendment and now I can, only set aside 10%, but it counts as 40, which is, I think we've discussed very fairly in a good conversation. So, do they need to align equally? I think there's a strong, in my experience with these developers, there's a strong consideration even before they come to the town on which one they want to do. So I have conversations every day about somebody who's like, hey, I want to do conservation versus conventional, which one's better? Those don't usually go anywhere. The conversation that goes somewhere is, I've hired a land use attorney to review your conservation subdivision code ordinance. I think we could yield this much out of it. Here's the site plan we have. Can we do a site walk now? I think they're doing their homework into these code sections in advance, so they're not really weighing, well, should I do one versus the other? They've usually made up their mind as soon as they come to the town. So I don't think they necessarily have to be apples to apples in terms of how they read it. It just has to be very clear what our expectations are on the option they choose.
Good point.
so then let's keep it simple.
Yeah,
Yeah.
gross acreage.
Yeah.
And then
Take
are
a
you
second.
also, now, I'm going to try to word this correct. Would you say that we should give, if we went adjusted, that we should also make them give additional 20 outside the primary? Because if they're 10s to 40, or are you kind of hinting that maybe we should be getting more?
I think the mandate, if you would, is that the council wants that 20% open space that's been debated in the past and that decision's been made.
And they're gonna get it in this, they're gonna get it in
Yeah.
this lineup.
So that's a tough ask for somebody to say, we want acre lots, but you have to set aside 20% still. I feel like that dissuades people from going conventional. So I
Right,
think
especially
we need some balance.
when that's what we really want. We
Yeah.
really want acre lots, people that have bad land, they can use conservation, right? And still get somebody to buy their land, right?
I wouldn't say conservation's all bad. I'm just saying.
No, but,
The way it's been used in the past,
We know what it's used for with tinier lots,
yeah.
the lower,
it-
still get a yield impact on a smaller amount of land. Development
Right.
costs
The
go
value of
down.
your land it maintains the value of your land.
Yeah.
Because if you have 30% of your land is bad in an R40 yield, you're gonna have less homes. Now, if you go conservation, you can build the acreage, you can build the amount of homes you have that the yield
You're
plan,
getting 2 per every lot.
that the yield plan gives you.
Sometimes 3 if you can make the averages work right.
okay, so I was thinking you're gonna build the same amount, but that's why you've gotta take out that primary conservation land. So guys,
But this would be harder.
That's
It'd
off
be
the
harder to
table.
put 40,000 square foot lots on 16 of them on 16
Yeah, 'cause
acres.
the road.
You got road infrastructure easements,
You got
but
a
I
buffer
can guarantee
potentially.
you in RCD that I can get 16, 20,000 square foot lots.
You got 100-foot buffer too to deal with if you're on a road. That's a lot of land, depending
Yeah.
on the size of the road,
well, yeah, and also depends on whether you've got a 100-foot frontage on the road or a 50-foot.
That's right.
What's the shape of the lot?
Right.
But I know right now the UDO, it requires a 100-foot buffer, but it cannot exceed 15% of, I think, the gross parcel. So if you've got a lot that's long and not that deep on the road versus one that's shorter and deep.
Yeah, and that just comes down to what you got, right? That
Yeah.
comes down to what you got.
Again, I'm going to always argue quality. And that's what I don't want us to pigeonhole something to where you get crap out of what you're trying to
I
do.
agree. I'm
with
just
the-
trying to manage how we get a UDO in that can cover so many
Yeah.
odd
Well,
situations.
I don't know how many conventionals I don't even know if we've seen many conventional come through. It's usually the smaller little ones that RCD doesn't even hard for them to apply to. So if you've got a 100-acre tract, the rarity of seeing a conventional, not coming.
Yeah, what we've had before, I think the majority of what came through was conservation.
Yeah.
You can do a 12,000-foot lot. You can,
Well, without
Yeah.
sewer though,
You
without
can count-
sewer, it makes it a little difficult to do the conservation.
you can't do conservation,
Right.
really.
So that's why in the last year or so, we did have some more conventional subdivisions because of the septics,
Yeah, and you can, on a conservation subdivision, you can put individual septics in the conservation land.
Yeah, you can use it right.
Yeah,
But we really haven't seen that yet, have we? I think the last proposal, I think Deal Lake had some of that, didn't it?
they were doing that.
Right.
Yeah.
And then
They were having problems, where's land?
Trying to find good
where's
land,
that
right,
can perk?
right.
And that's the situation that was happening with Morris Farms. Greg and I talked about that. I actually, again, make sure I got my concept right. I'm drawing pictures. And, the 500-foot cul-de-sac lane, where they were gonna go like 1,500 feet to go across the floodplain to pick up 3 homes.
And then they did that one stub road to the side that went to nowhere that counteracted our cul-de-sac.
Yeah,
Then they put hammerheads in. That's not a,
so they're always gonna find a weakness, but
yeah.
at least right now what they're showing is they maxed that out at 600 feet. So they stopped just before the floodplain. And then there's another lot, they were trying to save some trees. And it was like, I want to say it was 120,000 square foot lot
In that corner.
in that corner.
They gave it up too.
And they just said, we'll take that one out.
Yeah, that's an excellent point. Let me just note that Morris Farm is a Toll Brothers prospective project. It has not gone through the public participation process fully yet. It's not gone to the planning board. But because we're in a workshop, I think it's fair to talk about now. We're in a regular scheduled meeting. Let's probably not talk about that.
That's
project.
Good point. Good point.
Another thing, I just want to clarify on the conventional. In the past, you could draw your lots for yield a certain percentage into the floodplain, right? This is in the
Yeah, the
past.
whole property can be used.
Now that cannot be done anymore.
That's
No,
already gone. That's
That's
out.
Right.
that's out there.
So that's another additional shrinkage of what you can yield out of that anyway, so.
Yeah, if you had you could have 9,000 square feet to build a home, and you could have 31,000 square feet of floodplain, lakes, steep slopes. Now you can't do that.
Well, I
Yeah,
just
but
say,
again, when we say you can't, to your point of you can't, you're already shrinking it. If I was going to the land and it's in a floodplain,
Yeah, it's
before
gonna
I
be
submitted, I can submit to FEMA a low mar by field, and I can go bring some dirt in here. As long as I have a no rise certificate that says what all this that I'm doing doesn't make that creek rise 1/100th of a foot, I put my thing into FEMA, they sign back and they're like, you're out of the floodplain.
We would like to dissuade that.
I agree.
As much as possible.
I agree. But from a developer side, they're going to say, hey, homeowner Joe Weddington, we need to do this first. And-
UDO used to say as long as you had your livable area was 2 feet higher than the defined.
The base flood elevation.
Yeah, and now we're saying you can't have any of that on your.
Yeah, which is good.
This is where this whole concept started with Mayor Pro Tem Smith like a year and a half ago. Saying,
Yep.
we don't want anybody to be able to build in a floodplain, and we can't do that. We have to say, we can make it really hard to build in a floodplain. Or
Yeah.
we can make it so if you build a new subdivision, you can't build in a floodplain. But we can't tell a property owner that if you own a floodplain, your lot is unbuildable.
But our intent of doing this was to protect the current owner.
Yep.
But any for-profit development,
Mm-hmm.
you can't be there.
If your minimum open space is between 20 and 50%, which is really restrictive anyway, of course you should put that in HOA property rather than somebody's private property.
Yes. Yeah.
So can someone summarize here on,
I think we're just gonna take the sentence out,
I
right?
think that's all we need to do now is just take the second sentence out of minimum open space B and just leave it at minimum 20% of gross acreage of the tract will be required to be retained as common open space.
okay, so gross acreage,
This is for conventional.
yeah.
Yep.
917E, additional specific requirements for conventional residential.
Yeah. But now here comes the trick. Here comes the cartoons we're going to have to create. How do we put into this that they have got to pull out all this primary conservation at the beginning? We need somewhere in there that they know.
That's why we were using adjusted tract acreage. The intent was being, it's pulled out.
Well, we might have to just put something in there that says they could use that as their open space. the
So
adjusted
it's
tract
easier to
acreage.
say at a minimum 20% of the adjusted tract acreage of the tract will be required to retain as common open space for the calculation. But then we're saying you can then.
No, I think we need to be more deliberate and almost mandate in here a line that says you're going to pull out.
So this is the one I got. It says adjusted tract acreage yield means the total gross tract acreage after excluding the conservation areas as described in section D917B, which shall be no less than 50% of total tract for a residential conservation development and no less than 20% for other developments. Primary and secondary conservation areas shall be defined, and we got to find a place to put the definitions because right now it's not there.
Maybe we can talk about that, but I submitted something to Greg, and again, it was on the back side of the page where we have definitions of conservation land. And I've added words in there for primary conservation land, what's that mean? And secondary here. You can see that.
So Steve, what you just read made sense to both conservation and
Yeah, because that's a
Conventional.
definition of adjusted tract acreage yield. You're going to add both things in there.
But we're not using adjusted tract acreage. If we
We don't want to, but then we've gotten back to, are we going to use it, right? Because of the primary conservation removals.
Adjusted tract
yeah, but Chris
acreage-
said not. Bill said yes. I don't think that gets us back. That's a decision between the two.
Adjusted tract acreage yield is the gross, it's the 20 acres less the 4. That's the adjusted tract, that's the definition.
so then you're
So-
going to make him do 20% on the adjusted
I'm
tract.
just trying to clarify.
Yeah, but that's what I'm saying. If we use that word in that sentence, then we use that definition,
I thought we were using the
gross.
Gross.
acreage.
And if we use gross, we
Yeah, but
now,
we
we
still
just
have
have
to
to explain. We have to explain, not with adjusted tract acreage.
Right.
That's we're leaving that completely out.
Yep.
We just have to define
pulling that out.
pulling that
Well, we
out.
have to define primary, we have to define what that is and why it's not buildable. And
Yeah,
And then we have to say that it can't be used in a conventional subdivision, but it can be credited towards the 20%.
So do we have, outside of minimum open space, do we have somewhere in here where it says that they cannot build on unbuildable land?
I think that's what we're trying to.
Yeah, that's what we're trying to
That's the
figure
wording
out. That's
we're
what this
trying to get
adjusted
in.
tract acreage yield kind of came in.
So this one definition might solve 3 chapters worth of headaches. Yeah. Scott's point, I think that's where we're at. Use the gross, but we need to figure out a definition that or mandate how we pull out
We need to
primary.
tell them how to get to what's primary and how much potentially do they have on their lot.
And is primary and secondary definitions in our definitions already?
kinda.
Well, that'd be another good illustration
Yeah,
along
this is-
with the
this-
definition.
This is what I was proposing adding on, and actually I'll tell you what page it is. It's under definitions. I think it's on page 85. Well, it's 85 in the hard copy. I'm not sure what it is. I had it say, right now it says it has primary and secondary. And what I did, I added where it says primary conservation land means that portion of the tract that consists of view sheds, floodplains, wetlands, lakes, ponds, hydric soils, and steep slopes greater than 25%.
You might be able to build on a view shed.
And that, huh?
You might be able to build on a view shed if it's buildable land, if it's not, bad land.
Well,
The view shed is just for the view, right? Is that what when you say
I
view
think
shed? you
view
mean-
shed is looking into the land
Yeah.
from the
Yeah,
road,
that,
not
that
looking.
has a 100-foot area that we've got to stay
And
clear
then
of.
secondary conservation plan shall include that portion of the tract that consists, and this is the definition now, that consists of forest lands, farmland, historic sites. It said steep slopes. I'm saying, no, that should be moderate slopes.
Because we have steep slopes in the primary.
Yeah. Steep slopes that are, and it defines that moderate slopes, which defines it as less than 25%. Rock formations and land adjacent to parks. That would be the. Pass this over in a second.
So why can't we just say in no instance are they allowed to build in primary open space or primary
Primary conservation.
conservation lands?
Well, that's what we're saying. Well, I think that's the intent of what we're trying to say.
So
We
can
don't
we
know
just
what
put?
it is, though.
Well, that's
Yeah,
the
he
definition.
wrote it
What's-
off, but some of that land could be not bad land.
Then it wouldn't be primary.
Doesn't matter, right? If we label it as primary, then it's primary, regardless of whether or not it's
It's
bad
bad or
land
not.
or good land.
Right, so now you're taking more land out.
No,
No, it's
No,
the
you're
same,
No,
same
Because-
intent. So to Scott's point, just sum up a lot simpler as you just can't use it, can't build in it, can't be part of a lot kind of thing. How do we get to that sentence?
right?
Yeah, but if you're saying that it's land adjacent to parks, I mean, that could be flat buildable land.
that's
So then
secondary conservation.
take it out of your primary. If you have a problem with that, then pull that out of the primary. Don't leave it in the primary. We have to come up with whatever we want to put in the primary needs to be
It should be unbuildable land.
or land that we don't want somebody to build on.
Right.
Not necessarily unbuildable,
Correct.
but land that we don't want somebody to build on.
We have to define it.
Right, we have
Right,
to
that's
define
primary,
it.
right. And right. So maybe we pull parks out.
Of that
But-
definition part. but-
Right, but that's a different conversation. We have to, if we want to go with the gross acreage, then we have to define what they cannot build on. Outside of that, we're good. Numbers,
Right.
the numbers work out. We just define what they can absolutely not build on
In conventional.
in conventional, and then things start becoming simpler. So we have to put in verbiage that says, under no circumstances shall the
There's the
primary
definition of conservation.
primary conservation lands.
But we don't want to use conservation lands, right? Because conservation, again, we're in common open space. We don't want to
Yeah.
allude or imply
Let's
that it's conservation.
Yeah, that's confusing. It's area we want them to conserve, set aside, but the true definition of conservation lands is something that you deed over, and it's in this conservation type subdivision.
So then all you do is you
We-
ditto this and make a new definition for primary open space.
That's it. That's
And
great.
then-
I like that.
Primary
Then you
open
use
space
the-
actually.
use the exact same verbiage for this. It's just it applies differently.
Primary open space sounds great.
Yeah, I'm just concerned, I don't want to take more than, I'm worried about taking buildable land away from a conservation subdivision, more than, we could get into a big percentage.
Well, in the primary open space can maybe not paste all of that definition.
Right.
We can come to terms on what we want out of that for conventional, but you want it to stay when it's primary conservation, you want it to
Yeah.
be in there. And then in a conventional, we maybe remove parks or some language in there to just know that our intent is to pull out the,
Unbuildable stuff.
the
I
junk.
mean, we have a definition for open space right now.
Do you have a definition? for
Primary open space.
But I was gonna say, we're gonna have to have a primary open space or something else.
And then that's a one sentence thing, back to Scott's point, that we've just put in.
Right. And
look,
then-
they
then it's
see, they
easy for
pull
them
it.
To figure out what it is.
Right.
And they take it out, and if it's less than 20, they gotta come up with more. If it's more than 20, they're good.
They can say they've got 30%.
It's a deliverable brought to them, basically to the public up front. It says like, here's the area we shaded out. That's the primary open space. You know, there's no moving this around later. We've clearly defined where this area is per the town's definition. This is the area we're not gonna build on.
Right.
Yep. Yep. I think that's our kind of path forward, in my opinion.
So, yeah.
If, I mean, if we're trying to keep things simple, I mean, you know, we can lawyerese this to
Yeah,
death,
yeah,
but
we
if
wanna
we're,
keep it simple and
if we're trying to keep
separated.
it simple
Right,
so
we need it
that,
simple.
so that subsequent planning boards aren't confused when things come before them, I think keeping it very simple is the better option. And then, you know, if we have to make 6 new definitions to make it work, then we
Right.
make 6 new definitions that make it work. Or 1 or 2, whatever it turns out to be.
Yeah.
You got that captured, Greg?
As long as all the definitions are in the same ordinance and voted upon in the same manner, we can do as much as we need to.
Yeah. I mean, I think we're on the right path. We need to wordsmith, get something that we can present as a recommendation, I guess.
Right.
That we could all feel comfortable with, and then pass it
I'm just
on
trying
for
to
this.
get Someone that has their arms around. I'm a little shaky on it, but as long as people are grasping it well, I'm fine.
Yeah. I think I got the
we're good.
intent.
I think
Yeah.
it's good, and if we get a separate definition for primary open space affecting
Conventional.
conventional. We should really change the names and they're so damn close.
I mean, conventional conservation, you try to say them 3 times.
So,
So,
well, I think that's good for conventional, right? We kind of squared that away.
I think that kind of hammers home what
Let's
our
get to the
intent
real
was in conventional.
problem, The other one.
The last thing I would say, and I want to say this very clearly for future reference. If we could change what RCD is in terms of its name, so it's more clear if something's a conservation versus a conventional subdivision, that would be great in terms of the zoning map. So we know what types of development is allowed there. That said, there have been things stated kind of online and as campaign promises and other things that we want to get rid of RCD zoning. In the state of North Carolina, down zoning is
Yeah, you
illegal.
can't do it,
You
right?
cannot do that. You cannot get rid of RCD subdivisions. You
Well, we
cannot reduce these lot
can,
sizes.
we can, we have to have the people who own the land say, yes, you can do
Well,
it.
yeah, but who's gonna do that?
Right, nobody's gonna do it.
Yeah.
So just be cautious about, you know, we're gonna change all these things to make everything an acre lot. It's not that simple.
Not until you get rid of conditional zoning.
By right, zoning will make it easy.
Yeah. now
By
this
right
was-
zoning,
we
done
got-
deal.
We got the good one fixed up pretty good, and the next one has got a lot of stuff that needs to be addressed, I guess.
What was the next one?
Are we gonna talk about conservation? We're gonna talk about the RCD subdivisions? Because all that primary conservation that all needs definitions and.
Yeah, so I've got kind of Bill's tweaks on that, on the screen. That was part of that, you know, requirements for development kind of cheat sheet that he had provided. So he had talked about that adjusted tract acreage yield in 917B. I think we talked about what we want for 917E. It's just, do we want to tweak this section at all?
I think it's on the back of the document I gave you.
I think it's on the front.
And it does have a primary conservation land definition in there.
And again, it doesn't have to be exactly like we're workshopping it, we're coming up with ideas, but if the direction of, hey, do we want to roll with what's on the screen, or do we want to keep more of a theme with 917E and then come back at our regularly scheduled meeting with those changes, directing staff to do so. That's what we need to discuss.
So yes, one part is I do want to come back. That 917E, I think we can clean that up next meeting. I think that's a wrap. This one, I think I've already seen this from Bill. And I don't think I was having issues with his changing the thing. I think it was back to, again, we just need to have well-defined definitions, and probably, again, some of these little illustrations that can follow some of this stuff.
Illustrations help a lot.
Yeah.
I think when I put this, I sent it out to the subcommittee.
Yeah, I think I've definitely, I think when I read this, I just, again, if we had, when you look at his book, you see those illustrations, it helps put two and two together. So I don't think it would hurt for us to have some illustrations backing, not only the adjusted track acres definition yield, but then have a little brief snippet of an example of your grandson's artwork there, kind of thing, to pull out primary, show secondary. I mean, in its essence, almost do like the book does.
Yeah, we could go as far as to say primary conservation or primary open space has to be denoted as a dash line or has to be denoted in red, and then shows an example of that visual, so that's the deliverable that they have to provide.
When the application comes in.
Yeah.
They'll define primary, secondary.
We're giving you the definitions. We're telling you what we interpret that as. You have to show us that.
Show it on the
Yield plan, basically.
when you bring
Yep.
it in. Yeah.
Greg, did you have any recommendations on this wording from a planner standpoint? Did it look like we were?
No, I mean, if we change, gross to adjusted, those are all math things. That's up for the applicant to determine if they meet those standards, and then we double check that, and then the planning board, we triple check that. I agree with Bill's section here on identifying what's a priority and, moving the slopes around. We want to set aside those super steep slopes. So we want to identify kind of these secondary areas as other things. No strong recommendations. I'm looking for something that we all agree upon. So if I wanted it to be, if I wanted the slopes to be 12 instead of 10, like I'm not, that's not a hell of a mom's dying.
No, I'm just more like, do we got enough language in here? Once we add some illustrations to this, does this kind of bring this home?
I've said the word a couple times. I want the deliverable. I want the definition and I want the deliverable for staff to interpret. When a guy says, I'm submitting an application, what does this definition mean? I can say, it's right here. This is what I interpret that as. That's what our planning board interprets that as. Here's a visual example of how I want you to show that. And then when I get a bad application, which happens all the time, I can say, you did not draw it the way that our visual exhibit shows. Please do this.
So quick question. Do we have secondary conservation? Because it's not in our.
Yeah, that's a good point. That's kind of what we said is like, that's the other stuff, but we haven't really talked about what that other stuff exactly is.
So honestly, because what I have a little hard time flowing is we talk about the priority of the conservation lands in C, and then E, we define the primary conservation lands, but we don't necessarily, they're not, does that mean the tier A, tier B, and tier C in C are secondary conservation lands?
Right.
I mean, to me, it's a little disjointed.
No, that tier A, B, and C should be primary, correct? With all the rocks and all the unusual, and then
It's like tier A, you see forest lands.
oh no, I was reading that different. I was thinking that was. I might need glasses.
We have a definition of secondary conservation land.
Where is it?
Is that on page 85, under definitions, it is conservation land means a portion of a tract that is set aside for
That
permanent
was
and
D17B.
perpetual protection as required by this UDO. Then it talks about primary conservation. Primary conservation land means that portion of a tract that consists of floodplains, wetlands, lakes, ponds, hydric soils, and then I added in there steep slopes. And then it talks about secondary conservation land shall include that portion of a tract that consists of forest land, farmland, historic sites. And then I took out steep slopes and put in moderate slopes, rock formations, and land adjacent to parks. So we have definitions in there now. All I was proposing, we adjust the slopes. And I just went with the 25% because I'm assuming sometime in the past, planning boards have wrestled with what percent of slopes. I didn't want to rehash that one.
So if I were setting it up, I would put the primary conservation land on top, make that C, and then it would be the priority of secondary conservation lands would be really what I would C would be.
Yeah, we're almost replacing this section. So this priority of conservation lands section is like, okay, if you're Joe, engineer, and you're laying this out, we want you to start here and then go over here and make an interpretation here. It's fairly subjective for them to decide what they want to prioritize. This is a guide for them. Now that we're more strongly defining primary versus secondary lands, it's not a guide, it's a requirement. And so if we have these stronger definitions, we're saying, I don't care how you interpret the section C of what you're prioritizing. We're telling you what the primary and secondary lands are. You have to show them.
Because that there is all what the way we've been discussing it as secondary. Conservation.
Right. So we don't need to tier it, or we're not going to tier it anymore. We're just going to call all of that secondary conservation.
That's what I would think. That's why I took out the 25% because that plops it into the primary.
Correct. But if it's tiered, there's obviously things that are more important to the town, even within, instead of going primary, secondary, tertiary, whatever, quaternary, whatever, you're tiering your secondary, which we may still want to do, or do we just, in any respect, I think you put primary on top of it,
right? Because
that's the most important. And then I would say it's the priority of secondary conservation lands, or just take it out as tiers and just say secondary.
Yeah, I'm following.
Yeah, I'm following. Just don't know if it makes that big of a on the tiers. Because again, if you took out the steep slope, you still got a priority for secondary.
We prefer forest lands. We also prefer, even though you're required a buffer, you can put more conservation land up there. So your view shed from the thoroughfare, that's what at the corner of Weddington Matthews Road in Providence. That's so set back, that's all conservation land up front.
I'm fine with it being tiered. I actually do think that you probably have, not just primary and secondary, but you've got this within secondary. I'm just saying to kind of clean it up, I would think that you would put the primary conservation lands on top because it is primary. And then just because, again, similar words, you're using priority and primary are kind of back to back. So priority of secondary conservation lands.
I'm following you.
I see what you're saying. On primary conservation land, if I'm understanding, there is no priority.
It's all right.
It's all these.
Because it's all
inclusive. It's not this one versus this one versus
right. You're pulling it out anyway. It's coming out regardless if it's primary. But in secondary, if they had, if we had the choice between them using the moderate slope one as part of their conservation or the forest land, we would prefer that they use the forest land, which I think with our tree ordinance would kind of dictate that anyway. But
should that just say priority of secondary conservation land.
Yeah,
I
I
would
would
think so.
kind of say that at the very least, to Scott's point, because
Yeah.
priority, primary, I mean, we're right at the, when I'm reading it, and it doesn't in this paragraph say secondary.
Right.
I think if you did that, that'd clear it up. And then, like we say, primary is an absolute. There is no,
Yeah.
we prefer you
Yeah.
do this, then this, then this. It's all.
Yeah. Because, I mean, obviously they're going to have the discussion with us eventually, but somebody could, read through this and say, oh, well, their priority is, view sheds. So I'm just going to put all of my, regardless of primary, I'm just going to put all of my, conservation in the view shed. And then we'll go back and say, no, we really need the primary out first. So, it just kind of, it makes it, again, I think it makes it clearer and easier to follow.
Yeah. And then if you do the secondary sounds great, but then where do we fall in line at the end of this to put some illustrations, some like exhibits? Or do we put exhibits after like for instance, C, when we get to the bottom of it, do we want to show exhibits in C of what this would look like as far as an illustration?
We have that flexibility, the kind of the limited visual aids we have now are kind of put at the end of a theme or section, so.
That's what I was hoping. I would feel better.
So our visual aid would kind of be at the end of D917B or the end
Yes.
of D917E.
Cool. I think that's what pattern wise, that's what I'm used to seeing. Cool.
Just as long as they're labeled
Yes.
appropriately.
Yeah. And once they're in there, you might find that you want to add an exhibit A to the paragraph or something that
Well,
once
you
we've had
could-
a little bit of,
You could hyperlink it too, right? So that if, as you're reading it, if you're like, I wonder what that looks like, you could click it and then that would take you to the picture.
well,
Correct?
yeah. And I've gotten to where, man, if you print it out, Bill, you're not going to be on the right page. But if you get in here and you just click the table of contents, you're
Well,
rock starring.
We had that discussion at the planning board meeting.
Oh,
You weren't-
it's-
You weren't here.
Miss Dewey's not here to defend herself. I don't wanna
Well,
make
no,
any
my
comments.
printed out version, and then I go to this, but
Yeah.
I've gotten to where now I
They're
just
working-
hit that
we have
hyperlink
someone
stuff.
Working on the macros, right?
I'm not. Karen.
Karen is.
She's dog.
Yeah, if you go and click on it, it takes you to the right page.
I agree. But if you do the page
I'm doing it this way,
I've-
because I would do a search.
on
Yeah.
PDF,
Yeah.
that's what I
And
do.
then I thought, well, wait a minute.
But it's not, it
Yeah,
doesn't
it's
quite
totally-
get the same, but gotcha. But yeah, so I guess on this one, we just want to add a little bit of language on C to secondary, to put the word in there, secondary, take out Bill's steep slopes, add your adjusted track acreage. Down at the bottom where you've got E, you kind of just struck through and came up with a new one, didn't you?
I just tried to get the same information, but, yeah, can you put that up there? Will it show?
This is from your packet, so I think we still might be missing that second
Okay,
page.
it should be on, the whole thing's on the back of there, Scott, I think, isn't it? It has a lot of, I mean, to me, they're flowery words,
Yeah.
human life and property protection, yada, yada, yada.
So you basically are wanting to say primary conservation lands, and then you're wanting to go into because of their extreme limitations, streams, valleys, swells, submerged lands, floodplains, steep slopes greater than 25%, and other lowland areas warrant designation as primary conservation lands. They may also require adjoining buffer lands to be included as primary conservation lands. This is to be determined by an analysis of the protection requirements as determined
Yeah, that's where it gets a little.
by the planning board on a case by case upon finding that designation of such as primary conservation land would have significant long-term environmental impact. I might have to read that one a few times to know if I'm understanding.
Well, I think thematically,
I get where he's at.
we want to say that anywhere in these sections, let's say it's either B or E, we'll use E as an example. We move the definition and concept of primary conservation land to the top of the page and say, this is what we're looking for first. here's how it's defined. Here's how you define all the other stuff or how we prioritize other things. End of section, here's a visual exhibit of how you should demarcate primary lands on your yield plan before you submit your application to them. That's what we're looking for.
That I couldn't have put it that eloquent. Yes.
When
You might
the
wanna-
plan comes in, we want to
Yes.
see
Yeah, that's the bill.
this red section is primary conservation land. This green section is secondary conservation land. And the other section is Riverville.
Yeah, I mean, we've got yield plans before, and I do think that they were adequate for our UDO standards, but if they would say, we could yield 15 lots out of this thing, and then you see the backyard of that one yielded house, and it's got a topography change of 100 feet. And it's like, okay, technically, you could yield a house out of that front, but I want you to show that a lot more clearly so that we can contest that or say, is that really appropriate for a private lot, or should that be common open space?
Because if it falls off quickly, greater than 25%, it's gonna be primary anyway, right?
Right.
Off there. So as an example, when Keystone came through last week, a couple weeks ago, if someone like that came through in the future, everything was labeled, I think, as open space. Now, wouldn't it have, here's primary conservation land, the floodplain in the back, that kind of stuff. Here's secondary conservation land, and then here's where I'm building. And oh, by the way, that primary is X acres, the secondary is X acres. Is that's what we want to get to when it comes before the planning board?
Yeah,
correct?
and our chairman's a surveyor, he's used to delineating those areas.
Yes.
You
And I would say this too. I know I missed that special meeting, but I saw that packet. That is what they should have led with in the very beginning. It would have been a totally different ball game versus what they gave us at the very beginning. The second time,
Yeah.
that's what I was expecting to see the first time.
Yeah.
And I don't know if y'all know, I call it the differences, which is just my thing, but definitely the 6 pages on the first was a weak showing versus that second packet. So that was more of what I'm in line with seeing with what we had intent for seeing with 2B. And then, hashing out a couple of the little things through it. That's what I felt like would be a productive submittal and meeting. But yeah, so I guess we've kind of got some marching orders on those to make a stab. I think we could have probably both of these cleaned up minus how do we want to handle illustrations? Can we leave that for staff to?
Yes, yeah.
So we can make these things that we want to make recommendations, leave it to staff to handle the illustrations and then.
So
I can give you a doodle, and then by the time it goes to the town council for an ordinance, that's actually what's going to be inserted into text.
So do you want us to take a shot at writing the text, or do you have enough information for you to write the text?
I think it can go either way. Bill, I trust you in terms of your text amendments so far. If you want to take a stab at it, that is my job to do it. That said, I am out of town for the next week and a half, so it may not be ready for the next planning board meeting, which is a month or is a week earlier.
And Bill is always reading and eating the UDO.
Well, I'll be honest with you, I was looking to have Greg do it because I'm a little unsure of the stuff.
Well,
But
let
I
us,
think
we
maybe
can
get together.
Or why don't you try, when are you going out of town?
tonight.
Tomorrow morning at
Okay.
sunrise.
So I would say let's Bill, if you want to just send what you've had to make a stab, and then what we can do is, if I'm not mistaken, we can email it individually, right? And then let us make sure individual, we just pass it along.
Yeah.
If you send what you've got, I can go from there.
Or 3 can get together and we're legit. We just can't do 4.
I'd just say we do give us that first stab these next few days.
Right. It's a
And
whole lot
then
easier to try to
when
get
Greg
both.
gets back before meeting, Greg, if you read it and you're just like, look, guys, this, and this, that's when he kind of is our final edit to.
Okay, I'm on really shaky ground here, but I'll put together what I think
Ah.
and then.
Well, See, but that's the thing. Even if you are on shaky ground, then when you send it out, we're gonna say, no, you're on shaky. This is what we meant. And
Well, I
then-
think I think we all agree on the concept. They're just now getting it into words, and I'll take a shot at it.
Yeah.
So some of the things I noted in the records, as I'm the acting secretary for this workshop, is we don't necessarily have to align with the conservation developments because it's a
Right.
different type of project.
Right.
We're looking for some kind of deliverable, like a yield plan for these acre lots. We don't want to penalize people for building acre lots because that's kind of the preference of our citizenry is we want more of these types of developments because there have been certain loopholes in RCD developments. As I stated, RCD developments cannot go away because we cannot downzone.
Right.
We talked about the definition of gross acreage versus adjusted tract acreage and using that gross acreage versus having alignment of the two definitions. We were going to stick with the gross. We were going to remove that second sentence in D917E, which talked about the no more than 50% rule. We're going to add a bunch more definitions to define them. Primarily, we're going to define primary, and we're going to emphasize that as the beginning of each section as the deliverable we are searching for. The other things, these priority of conservation lands, use, et cetera, these are priorities for what you're setting aside, but these are more guidelines, whereas our primary and secondaries are strict definitions that we will be searching for them to meet that definition. We effectively are saying in no instance primary land shall be built upon. There's an expectation if you define something as primary, you're not building any stuff on it, no structures,
Nothing.
not really any development. We don't want you to really degrade there.
Yeah, we
or
want it
disturb there.
correct.
So we're asking them to show buildable and unbuildable land effectively, which is what council's goals were for this. Conservation lands, when done in this type of development, will be defined as primary open space. They're effectively the same thing in terms of being set aside. They have different legal ramifications of how they're plotted and how they're filed with the Register of Deeds. Conservation lands cannot be disturbed. Primary open space is land. We're asking you to say that you're not going to disturb. Primary is identified as a priority, and then the other sections of code. And then we will provide exhibits at the end of each of these sections that show the deliverable we are looking for, whether it's a definition of saying you have to hash it out or put it in red. We'll have a clear exhibit of what item they are to provide to the planning board for you guys to review compliance with.
That was money.
Can I get a copy of that?
You won't be able to read my handwriting.
I might be able to figure some of it
Yeah,
out.
You can watch back and hit pause and hit pause and hit pause. No, that was it. That summed it all up. I think for us guys on making these languages, going to just kind of copy and paste to a degree the primary open space definition. To Steve's point, take out some of the stuff that may not have been wanted in a normal against park, stuff like that. But we can get him back some verbiage
Yeah,
after we.
I'm not sure what primary open space is. I know we've talked about it.
It's
but
the primary
primary.
conservation area, but in a conventional subdivision, it's
Oh,
not
okay.
conservation,
Right.
so it'll be primary open space. We're gonna set it aside. We're
Not
gonna,
buildable, really, is what it's supposed, that's
Yeah.
the base of it, not
Yes.
buildable.
We don't use
land.
the term conservation.
correct, we're gonna use primary open
primary
space. That way we
Right.
hitting on the same similar bill.
Primary being the key, whatever you want to call it after that.
Yep.
Primary open space in R40 is similar to primary conservation in
Correct.
RCD.
We just may take a little bit of the words out of the definition of primary conservation.
Yeah,
To get it, and then we'll let Greg give a final edit, but
We have different town expectations for each.
correct.
So we don't want to quite treat them apples to apples.
yeah.
We have the same ecological goals for both. For any
Two
development
separate
town.
approaches. We're just going to define how they are
Mhm.
with some clarity. Because I had expressed some concern as I was looking at some subdivisions we've done. I actually went into the deeds office in Monroe We have some of our newer ones out there. The older ones say conservation land. The newer ones say open space.
Well, but I think Karen said that that might be a function of the deed office not having them labeled correctly.
Well, that's why I went into the deed office and pulled it all up.
Yeah, but didn't she say, she said you really need to check someplace else.
If the plat can say one thing, but if you're going into conservation, there's a totally separate
There's CCNRs and
Yeah.
other private restrictions.
instruments
That was my,
that
only, that
do
was
it.
my only concern. I couldn't find that in there.
Yep. But ideally, we would want that wording on a plat. Ideally,
Yeah.
just makes it easier for everybody. Because again, open space has a different connotation to what I can do in it versus conservation. Real quick, I'm not going to try to keep y'all much longer, but Toll had brought up on our septic that in 2B, if you'll pull up 2B real quick, they made a great point. And when we were doing 2B, the subcommittee, we met with the state and the county about the septic stuff. And although she told us about all the third-party uses, she didn't go in as detail as the actual third-party engineers did. Here's Appendix 2B. And we've say in there about the improvement permit, but the improvement permit in there comes from the county and can only be issued by the county. There is a third-party engineering company that can do it, that issues the same exact permit. That's actually, they were going to tell you it's equivalent. It's the A2 or A5, but it's a higher standard of permit than what. So the improvement permit is, hey, my daughter is 18 years old. She just got a job, Union County. She goes out and assesses your property for septic. She looks at a couple things on the checklist. Boom, you got septic. Here's your thing. You move on. That's the truth. These are soil scientists and have their license behind it. So they can't just do that. So they have to go up 3 more degrees to say what it is, bedrooms. And so they were wanting to say if we could either change that or recommend, they're going to meet with the mayor and them too as well, and add in their third party equivalent to some type of thing to that A2 permit that they do. And what they do is with their A2 permit is send it to the county. County signs it and issues. It's not the improvement permit per se. It's going to be their A2. And a lot of the developers use outside engineering because of their time.
Sure.
The county is
So
like,
if the county sees an A2 permit coming through, they pretty much rubber stamp it. Is that?
yes, and the engineer, if we wanted to talk, I think he was kind of open to talking to us, but I wanted them to get with the mayor and let the council members hear from him, because some of this just comes down to education. I didn't know it went this deep. We talked to that state and county lady, and she kept saying from her end that improvement permit, which can only be issued from the county. State lady kept saying about the third party engineers, but they didn't bring up this other permit. And this guy that was with the engineering firm did. And again, it's one of those things. If somebody's got a seal behind it, there's a little bit more education behind what they're doing, and no, versus my daughter coming out to tell y'all we can do septic through the county. And
So you're saying we need to add a little
well,
bit-
they're going to meet with the mayor. We'll see what they all say. But I just wanted to bring that up, that there is an equivalent or even a higher standard than that improvement permit.
My only question would be, is there ever an instance where the county doesn't issue their improvement permit if somebody has an A2 permit?
It's a good question for them, right?
Because that would be a catch.
Yep, that'd be a good question for them. But we'll let them see if the mayor and council says they want to, this is something for them, and they ask us to review that again, then we'll review it. Otherwise, they can go get the improvement permit and just know it's I don't know, all of it's going to be an expense to a developer, but they can.
Well, they would have to, wouldn't they have to have that anyway? Even if it's rubber stamped by the county.
Yeah, you're either going to come the equivalent of an A2 permit, or you're going to have an improvement permit. But we don't say anything but the improvement permit, so we don't even lend to the option of having a higher a third-party company do it.
Well, I think most of it's done that way. I mean, because the county gets backed up. I know when my.
Yeah, well, that's when we were talking to the county. I mean, she was absolutely like, we're so slow that most people have their own engineers. They do it, send it, we go. But they kept using the word improvement permit from the county. County can't issue the A2 permit, but they're equivalent technically. One's
So-
just a,
So is it just county approval? Is it just, as long as they have county approval?
well, a
So
county or an engineered approval that the county accepts as a.
Right, so the bottom line would be the county would accept that. And as long
Yes.
as they have county approval, it should be, we should be. able
Back to
go forward.
Scott's point, we want to make sure that is something that is accepted. And that'd be a good question for council to ask them when they meet.
Because my thought process would be that they're just trying to get it quicker. They need the improvement permit from the county eventually, and 99.9% of the A2 permits get that. But once they have that, they want to be able to come to us and say, we don't have to wait 3 months for the improvement permit from the county. I think is probably where we're going.
That's where they're headed.
Yeah.
That
So,
was their whole thing.
right. So,
Are all A2s accepted by the county?
right. And if the answer to that is no, then I think you would want to stick with
Improvement.
the improvement permit. If the answer to that from the county would be the answering party to that would be yes, we've never seen one that hasn't been, then maybe we could go with the A2.
Yeah.
But that definitely would, again, I'm perfectly fine as long as the developers know what we are asking of them. I'm fine with having them jump through as many hoops, as long as they know what the hoops are. So,
And that's what I think they were just trying to clear up with us, was that we only allude to the county permit. So there is verbatim no word of going to the engineer.
I think most developers, at least I know my subdivision, again, they're trying to get it done and get it through. So they hired their own engineers to do the work. Then they submit it to the county, and then the county would say, yeah, this is good.
Well, in our experience in surveying, rural areas that use the county to do septic get their septic area delineated, right? They go out there, they build their house, they get a septic, and it's not even 8 months after everything's active, and the septic failed because it was just, they looked at topography, they looked at a little bit of soil type, whereas
The 18-year-olds
yeah,
out there doing
these
it.
engineering firms, if that happens, his insurance is about to step in and pay for whatever he's sealed and messed up. So to some degree, I get the developer wanting someone on the, like, you botched this, we're putting a claim into your insurance because the county's like their own
So
sovereign nation.
The A2 permit seems to be what we want to get to.
Well, I don't know if we want to force them to use it because the
Well,
county is still, but I would
yeah.
say improvement permit or equivalent A2 permit or
All right,
something.
that's a good word.
But again, I just wanted to bring that up that I got a little bit of education the other day from them, and that I know they're going to talk to council and we'll see where it goes. But it's definitely kind of eye opening because all we did was talk to the state and county. We didn't, now in the hindsight, I was like, man, we should have probably talked to a soil scientist. We were getting all this information. So
We're the experts, we're the board at this point, so we're all getting educated.
yeah. Well, anything else?
I would like to raise one topic, and I'll make it real quick because you missed the meeting, is in Keystone, the planning board got into a real discussion over community green. We're saying for an RCD subdivision, conservation subdivision, you need a 10,000 square foot community green. And this one doesn't have one. And correct me if I'm wrong, Greg, but when they first came through, they didn't have a community green, but they didn't have a walking trail either, right?
Correct, there was no walking trail previous.
So then they came through and said, we screwed that one up. So they put in a walking trail in lieu of community green. And I read the UDO as a walking trail, and actually we listed on there as an amenity. You want to do it, great, it's not required. And anyway, the planning board we all didn't agree on that. And so my concern is, and this was the example, went back and looked at it. When we tighten up the UDO, we're expecting, part of the reason we do that is to get the developer to be more creative as they lay out their lots. Versus here's a road, here's a grid, I don't think they even thought about that. Their lots, and again, there's only 12 lots, but their lots exceeded the 20,000 square foot required. In my mind, if they planned that correctly, they actually could have gotten the lots a little bit smaller, still meet the 12,000, and they would have picked up 6,000 square feet of land. So they'd need another 4,000 to get the green. And that's basically a 60 by 60, 60 by 65. And in my mind, we say is required to the greatest extent possible. That's the out, because we try to help these guys and they jump all over those outs. So at a future meeting, I'd like to bring up, we revisit that thing. Because if our intent is, it doesn't do us any good to tighten up these ordinances and then we have the outs. I mean, we need them because there's going to be those.
I'm assuming the outs is they wanted the walking trail in lieu of the.
Sure.
Well, I think the biggest issue was that the open space was going to take a lot away. It's going to take one down to 11 lots. So,
But I think if they planned ahead of time, that might not be the case. You know, they were
No.
saying, well, we have to put it here. The land falls off 15 feet, and we're going to have to take a bunch of trees out.
So
Yeah.
this goes back to what I was saying, where I think we need to have a meeting where they come in with their preliminary plat so that we can look at, and not the charrette where we're out on site and all that, but a real planning board meeting where they're come in with a preliminary plat where we can go through that and say, well, you know, we know it doesn't say you have to, but in this instance, you know, you really need to plan for it because, and that gives us time to look at the fact that they had larger lots, although I think council wants larger lots. So bear that in mind as you're taking,
Yeah.
you know.
and not only that, the size.
Well, that's a good, because I mean, if you're giving us good tit for tat, we're getting something out of it. I don't want to be so hell bent that we
Yeah,
can't
that's
get
my
out of our
concern.
box.
My
But
concern is that, you're going from 7 is the minimum. So if you have a 7, 8, or 9 lot subdivision, now you want to require an open space, that's going to drop that down even more. So, I mean, at the small end, I think it's worded properly. It's as required, right? But maybe when you get into the bigger RCD developments, 25s to 35s, maybe it should be required. So, so we leave ourselves a little bit out on those small subdivisions who are going to have a tough time paying that HOA bill, when you got 12 houses.
And that's why we leave the outs, because when you write a UDO, it's got to cover every situation. And I'm fine with it. Maybe I'm.
well, again, it's us to negotiate
Yeah.
our terms on when it is going to be required and steadfast, or when we're getting some kind of concession that, okay,
Right. And I'll give you Weddington Glen as an example. I don't believe they have a common area over there or an open, what do you call it? An open.
Community.
the green
community
space,
green.
yeah,
They don't have
community green.
35 something homes.
There's one at
They don't have one.
Enclave at Baxley.
They have one.
Yeah, it's 1.3 acres.
Yeah, it's a pretty good sized one.
So.
And they're having a lot of issues with it.
well,
And that's not nothing to do with the
Yeah, I know.
UDO.
Maybe I feel like I'm trying to hold our developers to a higher standard.
And that's
Well,
gonna
in
get
some
And I
ways-
understand the situation, but the fact that this is one we've worked with in the past, that I remember when they made their show and tell at the council, they said, well, do you want us to meet the tree ordinance or the buffer ordinance? Well, to me, that sends up a red flag. It's not either or.
Right.
And we struggled with them on a buffer on another subdivision. So it was kind of, I don't want to say old school, where it used to be they would tell the town what they were going to do.
Oh no, he definitely came in with 6 pages when I was the first one here and said, this is all the planning board needs to see.
Yeah, so I mean, I just feel we,
And that's true, you know, that subdivision has a 100-foot buffer, and I'm not taking up for the guy, I'm just saying, there's a 100-foot buffer that we want landscaped in the front of that thing.
Yeah.
And you want an open space, which takes a lot away, common green, which is gonna have to be maintained. They're gonna have to maintain street lights, they're gonna have to maintain the stormwater, right?
well,
On
they don't
12
maintain the HOA, well, you're
on
talking about
12
the HOA.
On 12 homes.
Yeah.
So, you know, you're talking about 2,000 a year as an HOA bill.
Yeah,
I'm gonna summarize that in a very politically correct way. I'm gonna say that rather than revisit a topic that y'all have already voted on and is a pending town council issue, that code issue is a could, maybe we should revise as a text amendment as a future, that be a trigger with a certain number of lots. So it may not be very fair for somebody with 7 lots to build a neighborhood green, but somebody with 40 lots, that's a lot more reasonable than ask.
And there's a lot more resource available to take care of all that stuff, so.
Well, with that said, I got one more question for, I guess, Greg, council. How does it work now down to planning board? Is it just we keep operating the way we operate until we get a seat filled?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, so that person basically has to be nominated by a councilman, and so until they do that, we have a vacancy.
But there's
How
nothing
about-
stops us from doing what we do.
yeah.
So how does it affect-
As long as you have 4.
Okay.
Now you got the other 2 boards that affects too, right? You got the adjustment board and the historical board. I mean, that
Yeah.
adjustment would be the important one.
Yeah, but
Well,
We
there's-
got people that.
But
But they had alternates.
We
Right,
got
there's
alternates.
two, yeah, you and I are the alternates, I
Yeah.
think, on that anyway, so one of us would just rotate on
Yeah.
her place.
Okay.
As long as the number required for a majority doesn't change, then you should still be able to conduct business as usual.
But with one down, everybody attending is of the essence to make sure we,
well, we're missing
We're
2
missing
now.
2
We're
tonight.
I
missing
know.
Amanda, but
This
we
is our
still have
limit, yeah.
yeah, that's what, but I wouldn't want it to be. I'd like to see if we could, again, I get it. We're all traveling, doing things, but as full as possible, as much as we can. So
Mr. Chairman, are you looking for a motion?
I would love a motion.
I'm making a motion to adjourn.
So, or second.
In favor?
In favor.
Adjourn. Thank you, guys.
All right.
That wasn't bad. That was an hour and 40 minutes.